What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the review of Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 3, entitled Breaker of Chains. So, like I alluded to in my last episode review, which was yesterday, I will be continuing probably on a daily basis. I can't make a promise of that, but probably on a daily basis there will be a Game of Thrones review out every day until I'm able to catch up to where we currently are, which I believe is episode 8, because episode 7 was Mockingbird, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, before I get into this episode review, a couple of preliminary things. There wasn't really much in this episode, just a lot of subplots that were set up to be developed in later episodes. However, the stuff that was dealt with in depth in this episode was a lot. There was a lot of substance and a few things that were explored in depth in this episode. So let me just get a lot of the small stuff out of the way first, which is like three subplots. First, with Jon Snow at Castle Black. They realize now that they have to kill all of the mutineers at Craster's Keep in order to keep them silent. Because apparently Jon Snow told Mance Rayder that there was like 1,000 people at Castle Black, when in reality there's only like 100. So up to this point, the Night's Watch has been very, very lucky that Mance Rayder hasn't figured this out and attacked accordingly. So now they got to go back to Craster's Keep, kill all those guys, keep them silent. Next subplot that deals with Davos. So it looks like Davos is going to send a letter to the Iron Bank of Braavos so that they can fund Stannis' war effort to reclaim, or not to reclaim, he never had it, to claim the Iron Throne. That's going to be a very interesting development, given the fact that we know that the Iron Bank of Braavos is already funding Westeros. And I don't mean just like funding them politically or militarily, like all of Westeros is being funded, is being kept afloat economically by the Iron Bank of Braavos. So it will be very interesting to see how this plays out. You know, if Davos gets a response, or if he goes there, or what. This is going to be very interesting development, because obviously there's a conflict of interest there. So now on to the more important stuff, or at least what I take to be the more important stuff. First, let's talk about Sansa and Peter Baelish. My first thoughts at the end of last week's episode, as it pertains to Sansa, was, damn, she got away pretty fast. That dude really, I forget the guy's name. Damn it, what is that guy's name? The one who gave her the necklace, talking about my grandma. Anyway, he got her out there pretty fast. And I thought to myself, man, her escape was really well executed, really well planned. And then it turns out that, in fact, Peter Baelish was involved in plotting her escape. So there's a couple of things that are raised by this development. First, obviously, this sucks for Sansa. I mean, really, any development in relation to Sansa sucks for Sansa. I mean, invariably, it only gets worse for Sansa. She went from being a hostage at King's Landing to now essentially being a hostage of Peter Baelish. And that's what she is. There's really no mistake about that. She has no way to get away from him. And if her past actions are any indication, she probably won't even attempt to get away from Peter Baelish. And even if she did, where would she go? I mean, there's just no way around that. But like I said, everything always gets worse for Sansa anyway, so this is no surprise. However, it's not exactly clear how Baelish intends to use Sansa or what sort of schemes or machinations he has for her. But I have no doubt, I mean, because this is Peter Baelish after all, I have no doubt that he has some nefarious purpose in mind for Sansa. So that's number one. Number two, I wonder if Baelish had anything to do with Joffrey's death. I'm assuming that he did, simply because he was the one who hired Dantos. That's his name, Dantos. And Dantos was in the perfect position to take advantage of a fortuitous event, if you can put Joffrey's death that way. So he was in the perfect position when Joffrey died to lead Sansa to escape, and he was hired by Peter Baelish. Seems like too much of a coincidence. At some level, I'm pretty sure that Dantos either had some hand in Joffrey's death or knew about it because it was orchestrated by Peter Baelish, who had hired him. And not only that, but if you go back and look at that episode, Dantos was not in the least bit surprised about Joffrey's death. It wasn't like this was just a spur of the moment type thing, like, oh my gosh, Joffrey's dying, let me go help out Sansa, who I really liked and who saved my life. No, it seems like it was just really well executed and orchestrated. Doesn't look like Dantos was surprised in the least. So now let's talk about Tywin. Got a lot to talk about in relation to Tywin in this episode. So I must say that I really liked Tywin's characterization in this episode. Particularly, I like the way the writers fleshed out his sociopathy in order to expand his characterization. And at this point, it should be obvious to everybody that Tywin Lannister really is a sociopath. That's just, there's no way around that. It's as clear as day at this point. But like I said, what I really liked about this episode is the way they fleshed out his sociopathy in order to expand his characterization, and did so in a way that really touches on the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath, because most people tend to use those terms interchangeably, even though they're not interchangeable. In Joffrey's case, what you had was a psychopath. Psychopaths are impulsive, impulsively violent. They go into fits of rage at the least bit of humiliation or what they perceive to be a slight. They're often erratic. They can be sadistic at times. Most of the times they are sadistic. Most psychopaths are sadistic in that way. They derive pleasure from just simply hurting other people. But Tywin is different from Joffrey in the sense that he'll certainly use violence in order to achieve his goals or achieve his ends, but he's never impulsive. I mean, even if you go back to the scene with Arya Stark, where he felt insulted. I can't quite remember, but he felt insulted. Well, he didn't know it was Arya at the time, but he felt insulted, and he told her, "Watch yourself. I like you, but watch yourself." That's a sociopath. Psychopath would have immediately gone into a fit of rage and violence. So like I said, Tywin is not above using violence in order to attain what he wants, but he's not impulsive. On the contrary, he's calculated. And he'll even eschew violence if there are other practical alternatives. Another example, when he was at Harrenhal and it was the Tickler and somebody else who was torturing everybody, and then Tywin comes in and is like, "What the hell are you doing? This is completely inefficient. There's no reason for you to be torturing these people. We could use them for the war effort." So he's not sadistic in that sense. He's a social predator. That's what sociopaths are. They're calculated social predators above all else. They don't eschew violence, but they will use it if there are no other practical alternatives. And this was really well explored in a fascinating way in this episode through Tywin's questioning of Tommen, who's about to ascend to the Iron Throne. So Tywin is questioning Tommen about what makes a good king, and Tommen goes through several traits of what he thinks makes a good king. He goes through piety, justice, strength, and gradually, through Tywin's questioning and prodding, they come to what makes a good king, which is being judicious, being wise. And this shows me something about Tywin. He's not just a strong man. I mean, a lot of people see him in that light. He'll do anything it takes to get what he wants, but he's not the stereotypical strong man. He's a shrewd military strategist. He's clearly a historian, because you can tell this through his questioning of Tommen. He excels at statecraft, and in some sense, you can even consider Tywin to be a rather astute political philosopher. I mean, because he goes through all the traits: piety, justice, strength, and he's trying to teach. He basically gave Tommen a lesson in political philosophy. And I just love the way the writers have fleshed out his characterization over the course of 3.5 seasons in order to show how he occupies all of these different roles of being the person who excels at statecraft, the military strategist, the historian, the political philosopher, because it really adds layer upon layer upon layer of depth to his characterization. And this is also seen in the family dynamics of the Lannister family as well. There's these deeper levels of characterization. First and foremost, Tywin is a familial parasite. I mean, that's also a hallmark of a sociopath. It's not just that they're a calculated social predator, but that they tend to monopolize power in all of their personal relationships. It's almost always the case for a sociopath. They're incredibly charismatic. They seem to be normal by all accounts. Somebody could be a sociopath and you would just never know it because they appear to be normal, and their normality is based on their calculation. But in almost all cases, sociopaths monopolize their personal relationships. They're familial parasites, social parasites, in that sense. And honestly, that's what all relationships of domination are based on. A sort of parasitism, just being a parasite on someone else, using someone else to obtain something that you want. And again, that's the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. A sociopath is able to calculate the costs and benefits associated with certain actions, and will even exercise a remarkable amount of restraint if they think that doing so will get to some larger goal in the future. Psychopaths are characteristically unable to make certain cost-benefit analysis like that. And again, even within his own family, Tywin is more than happy to use coercion, manipulation, subtle forms of domination. He'll use violence. He'll certainly use violence sometimes. But most of the time, he'll just eschew violence for other alternatives that he thinks are more practical. And in this particular familial context, the paradigm of Tywin's control, and really the paradigm of control throughout all the noble houses of Westeros, is the paradigm of pater familias. Pater familias is a tradition. It is a sort of political, it's a socio-political concept that dates back to ancient Rome. It's an ancient Roman tradition, which basically means that the oldest living male controls the family. And it's the essential familiar structure of all patriarchal societies, where the male is at the head of the household, the oldest living male, and he's the source and foundation of the entire family. He uses the members of the family as the source of his own identity, and he controls them socially, culturally, economically, pretty much in every way possible. And that's Tywin Lannister, right down to a T. And this is very astutely characterized. The writers, I mean, this was just a very well written episode, especially the whole scene with Tywin and Cersei and Tommen. Just a very well written episode. This idea of pater familias was very well symbolized by Cersei's subservience in throughout that entire scene. When Tywin first starts off to question Tommen, Cersei says, this isn't the time for that. Tywin doesn't even acknowledge her. I mean, he just continues. Like, he doesn't even stop to even stare at her or or to say, this is how it's going to be. He just continues, just completely ignores her. So in this scene, notice how Cersei's identity shrinks before Tywin. And even visually in the scene, she's in the background. She's not even in the foreground. It's like she's not even an important part of the scene. She's just in the background behind Tommen and behind Tywin. So visually, even visually, she's cowed into submission before Tywin. And Tywin makes sure. And another thing, it's not like Tywin pulls Tommen to the side and talks to him, or Tywin talks to Tommen when he's not in the presence of his mother. He makes sure that he questions Tommen in front of Cersei to show that he owns Tommen. That Cersei may be the biological mother of Tommen, but the one who owns him is Tywin. So he has to establish that form of domination right off the bat. And even, talking about Joffrey as if he's an object to be used, saying that Joffrey wasn't a good king, and that's probably what got him killed. And it's not even that he makes the comment about Cersei's dead son right in front of Cersei, but if you take that a step further, the implication isn't just that Joffrey wasn't a good king. It's that Cersei wasn't a good mother either. I mean, so the way this scene was set up, the way the depth of Tywin's characterization was explored, and the familial dynamics of the interaction between Tywin and Tommen and Cersei, and even visually, very, very striking scene, very, very well written. So now let me talk about Cersei. And this also kind of pertains to that entire scene. Let me just start off by saying that I know most people will disagree with me for what I'm about to say, but I really feel strongly about this. Cersei is really a sympathetic character. I mean, throughout her entire life, she's gotten the really short end of the stick. Her mother dying at an early age, so any sort of, genuine and substantive emotional bond that she would have had towards anybody as a child died with her mother. And not only that, but even if that wasn't the case, she would be a sympathetic character simply because Tywin Lannister is her father. And she's automatically a sympathetic character. I mean, it's like having Saddam Hussein as your father. Like, could you just imagine how fucked up your life would be? How horrible you would be as a person if you were so unlucky as to have Saddam Hussein as your father? It would freaking be awful. It would just be downright awful. And I mentioned this before in an earlier episode review, and I have to mention this again. The cause of Jaime and Cersei's incestuous relationship is Tywin. This just simply no doubt about that. They are using each other to fill the void left by the absence of their mother and left by the fact that Tywin is such a tyrannical figure and is simply incapable of expressing any genuine emotion of love. It just seems like he's incapable of doing that, of bonding with his children in any substantive way. So the romantic relationship between Jaime and Cersei is just a manifestation of their attempts to find some love in their life because they can't get it either from their mother, she's dead, or their father because he's simply incapable of giving it. So narratively, it's important that that Jaime's, and I'm really struggling to how to phrase this. I mean, I want to say semi-rape, but that just doesn't sound right because rape is the sort of thing like it's either a rape or it's not. but what happened in this scene between Cersei and Jaime, it was a rape, but it wasn't a straightforward rape. And I know that sounds weird to say it like that, but the scene is complex, it's complicated, and it is incredibly ambiguous. I mean, because on one hand, Cersei is saying no, but on the other hand, she's very clearly physically reciprocating. So it's kind of in that ambiguous space where you can see how her position as a female lends itself to her being coerced in this fashion. So in a larger sociocultural context, the scene can be read as a rape. But in the literally watching it, it's not quite up to the level of a rape because she, like I said, she does physically reciprocate Jaime's advances throughout the scene. I mean, she really does. So again, I have to just use the inadequate phrase of a semi-rape. It's just I can't get around that word because there's just no other way to describe it. So narratively, it's important that Jaime's, again, semi-rape of Cersei follows Tywin's dehumanization of her. Because that's pretty much what the scene with Tommen was. Just a flat-out dehumanization of Cersei. And it's through that semi-rape that the male privilege and power is passed from Tywin to Jaime. And you can clearly see that. First, you have Tywin in the first scene, who establishes his male privilege and power over Cersei. And then, in the very next scene, chronologically, directly following that scene, you see the male privilege and power symbolically passed down from Tywin to Jaime, as Jaime exercises a form of coercion and domination over Cersei through his rape of her. Again, these two scenes just, I mean, these two scenes alone makes the episode for me because of how well written it was, and of course how gut-wrenching it was for Cersei. I mean, just terrible. And again, we see that Tywin is not just the origin or the cause of the incestuous relationship between Cersei and Jaime because of his inability to show any genuine emotion of love, but he's also the origin and cause of their incestuous relationship because he passes down a sort of cultural inheritance to Jaime, symbolically, of male privilege, not just symbolically, but also literally, of male privilege and power. Just fantastic writing throughout those two scenes. And also, let me just again touch on Jaime's characterization. I know I touched on it last episode, but again, I have to say this again because it seems like my prediction was, well, it came to fruition in this episode. I warned you about Jaime's characterization. I said that his relationship with Brienne did not necessarily mean anything for him becoming a better person. And I explicitly talked about the difference between character development between character development and character growth or character transformation in a positive sense. And that's exactly what we got here. I mean, there's no way to get around it. Jaime essentially raped his sister. There's at this point, if you were hoping for any sort of redemption with respect to Jaime's character, this scene completely should dispel that for you. It just doesn't look like it's gonna happen. Other thoughts on this episode. Oberyn continues to G-check Tywin, of course. And this was a very entertaining scene when Tywin comes to question Oberyn in the brothel about Joffrey's death. And Oberyn questions Tywin about the mountain and his actions. And Oberyn says something to the effect of, "Do you deny that you had a hand in my sister's murder and rape?" And then Tywin looks at him and says, "Categorically." Everybody knows that this is completely not true. And yet he stands right there in front of Oberyn Martell and tells him categorically. Nothing had absolutely nothing to do with that. Obviously, that's bullshit. And I really couldn't help but laugh at that scene because Tywin really has the gall. I mean, for Tywin to have the gall to stand up there and say that, really some black comedy. This was this week's black comedy. You know, we always have to have some black comedy in the Game of Thrones. This was this week's black comedy. Also, Daenerys. I still don't know quite how to feel about Daenerys's character and her characterization. And again, I would just be cautious in believing that she's morally righteous, that she's just some goody two shoes. Again, I talked about, I believe it was in my episode 1 review where I talked about how she seems to have all the qualities of someone who has a messiah complex. So again, I would just caution you, especially in light of Jaime's character, the developments with Jaime's character. So I would just caution you to not quite be willing to believe yet that Daenerys is the savior that she appears to be. And I'm also not sure about how I view Daenerys as a female character, whether or not she's just the token powerful female character, or how I should perceive her. I would really need to know more about the extent of her power and the function of her power within the context of the narrative. But I love this episode because it really shows how shrewd she is as a military strategist and tactician. And citing a slave insurrection as a tool of military conquest, 2 thumbs up. Nice. Gotta love that. So all in all, I think this was a very good episode. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.